Elliot flies almost everything and is fresh off of his latest successful emergency.
I think you saw it on the takeoff, but here on the landing, it's just another reminder of just how poor of an airport Compton is for flight tests. It's surrounded by a lot of really not nice places to land.
And since we're about ready to test fly the RV-14 we just built, we gave him a call. Well, want to do this thing?
I want to do this thing. I want to know how to test airplanes.
Here we go.
That's why we're talking to a guy who's crashed 50 times.
Perfect.
Actually more, right? When did you stop counting 50?
I didn't say I crashed 50 times. I said I had 50 emergency landings.
How many crashes?
I don't know. They did officially total that Mustang, so that's another kill.
All right, let's get into it. So trying to wrap my head around managing a flight test program with an expert remotely, I figured the best place to start was Dave's den of nerd awesomeness, so he could help manage a three-way call that I wanted to capture video from all sides. Dave's day job has to do with everything computers and IT, and he's also the chief pilot at the museum, so he's going to be managing the flight ops and writing the flying orders for the airplane. Now, he obviously also manages this fleet of warbirds, so it's a pretty unique situation that we're in, building this airplane at a museum. And we're approaching the end of this 2-year build, so it's a pretty exciting time as we head into flight testing, and the airplane is about to be a part of this fleet. Now, being the chief pilot of the organization, Dave will be doing the first flight, and I'm happy to give it to him. But to be clear, Dave is way more qualified than I am to do this. He's been test flying this fleet after maintenance and so on for a long time, and he's about to run the program for this new to our fleet Cornell that hit a deer while it was being trailered from Alberta. And I partly blame Elliot for this because he's the one that convinced us to put it on a trailer instead of attempt to fly it home. But in all seriousness, that was a good idea because it had not flown in a long time. But anyway, here we are at the point of test flying the RV-14, and I knew that my first call was going to be to Elliot when we got to this stage. The reality of it is, even when you come crashing down in a pile of dust, you bring it home. You do a whole spectrum of different types of test programs, right? I kind of want to use the Delta Wing thing as just a bit of context to talk about the idea of a program that...
Montage of Elliot crashes is what he's talking
Cut to circus music.
We'll get back to this awesome Delta Wing project, but first, Elliot's resume. He flies everything from the Extra 300 to a bunch of home builds. He races airplanes at Reno, test flies newly built airplanes. It's just been amazing to watch his stuff on his YouTube channel. I'm addicted to it.
I've got all 8 EGT alarms. I think we're done for the day. Copy.
I had no excuse to be scared. I was like, my boy's here. What's to be scared about?
That's Justin, Elliot's partner, and they're a pretty awesome test program tag team.
Elliot flew an airplane, and I flew a different airplane.
We flew 2 airplanes.
We just flew 2 airplanes.
We're kind of looking at you as our daddy test pilot, consultant, trainer dude to tell us how not to do it wrong.
It was a British guy you were speaking to on the radio.
I appreciate the help, man. No, the engine quit right as we were talking. As far as debrief items, once we had the gear issue and I had a guy on the radio who knew what was going on, I could have been more directive about communicating that we needed a fire bottle and probably need to get the fire trucks rolling. Part
of the problem with the Titan program was that Elliot did not have his partner Justin with him for that one. He just published a full hour-long debrief about that incident. Okay, so I have you guys both together with a cool background. Just define your roles.
So for this program, we quoted me as test pilot and Justin as test director. So we try to establish those 2 roles really early on in the program. There's sort of a magic thing that goes on where the test pilot gets this like sort of halo in the group and your words get really powerful. And then you can burn political capital with the customer really fast. So it's nice to have kind of a runner that can kind of be like loud and obnoxious and be more tactical with driving things. So this is exactly the dynamic we were talking about earlier. Like right now, spark plugs need to be pulled out and looked at.
Yeah.
And I'm having trouble standing there and thinking about like lefty loosey, righty tighty, because I keep going back to how am I going to operate it.
Yeah.
And I can kind of pull back a little bit because first of all, I need to keep more of a strategic view, and I need to worry about that political capital so that you can sort of be protected for the big political capital that might be coming up in the future. Say you bend something or something else, right? You want to make sure you're sort of protected, but then he can put the sort of tactical pressure on, like we need to get this done, we need to, and kind of back me up there.
So am I understanding this as good cop, bad cop?
I wouldn't go that far.
But almost?
Am I totally out in the weeds on all that?
No, I think, like, you know, when we talk to the camera, we like to exaggerate. So, and it makes more sense if you say it that way. But I think, in reality, like, Elliot's got to focus. Like at some point during the week, we have this. We start with a question mark and we end with a flight. Like at some point we like learn a bunch about the airplane, and then we have to like get your head straight to fly the damn airplane. So it's that second. We're in that second part right now where Elliot's like getting into the operational stuff, and I'm like trying to get the damn thing finished. Which would be awesome if he showed up in it. We were already past that first part, but that's never happened. Right. No matter how many times we've gone to a program, like you could talk to the guy on the phone. Yeah, we're ready to fly. Like I have 200 hours of ground run on it. Like it's awesome. It's good.
I flew it 4 times.
You'll show up next day, you'll be flying, and every time there's that first window where we're both scrambling to get the technical done.
I mean, but that's one that didn't even launch, right? We spent days doing a lot of work.
Yep.
I have huge respect for guys like Gary that go all the way with their own design like this, but I have to admit, I'm happy that we're working with a tried and tested Vans aircraft.
Obviously, being in a single string aircraft, the automotive engine forces you to non-redundant fuel injection, non-redundant ignition. As soon as we had a stuck gear, we were that much more vulnerable to the exact electrical failure that we saw. So as if there wasn't enough reason not to fly an aircraft with single redundant electrical system, this is certainly another reason.
I mean, the reality of it is, if you do have a RV-14 that was built and just rigged wrong, then we're going to run into these problems that we're going to find on a test flight. That's what we're kind of looking for. We expect this not to be exciting, but we're going into it to mitigate any excitement.
One of my favorite criticisms of my channel is that it makes the assumption that flight test is exciting, because it isn't.
So that's funny too, because so the footage that we have of the Delta wing, I think, is going to be a great opportunity to tell a story that was potentially exciting. Did you expect to be that fast?
It's pretty fast.
That's
the
cool.
nose gear is pretty wicked, man.
Your process is set up to mitigate the risk by assessing and designing an envelope, right? I mean, we had meetings where you looked at the airport, and if you had to launch and couldn't turn back and all this, which runway you're going to use, like where's the fence. Was this a conversation about where not to crash?
We're trying to...
Did I just miss that conversation?
Yeah. So earlier, we took a tour of the airport and looked at this fence and then the condition of the runway on either side of the runway, the grass, and then this runoff area.
Part of this planning involves how to coordinate with emergency services that may need to access remote areas of the airport property.
I had climbed up to 4,000 feet, which probably was the smartest decision of the day. It gave me enough altitude to make decisions to get back to the airport. So that was the right move. The most reactionary decision I made of the whole flight was when that right main collapsed. There was a moment there where I could have just, shut the engine off and let the airplane collapse on the ground. Instead, I decided to add power and go fly again. Basically, all that did was let Jim give a little bit of a warning that we were getting ready to have a failure. It didn't do much. In fact, it probably ended up crashing faster than if we had just let it crash initially, if that makes any sense. We got away with it, so that's good. But if we had hit the prop on that forced go around, that could have been nasty.
Knowing the local area really well is critical. Like that's the kind of stuff I've got you guys having meetings like that while you're also working on the weird stick envelope that airplane had, where you knew there was this strange place where you could be.
The mixer of the elevons ends up being sort of infinitely interesting. You think you know about how a mixer works, and then you play with one for a while, and then you realize maybe...
I don't even know what you mean, a mixer? Like the stick, because it blends...
Because one surface is doing both pitch and roll. So there's a mechanical system that makes that happen. And so you want to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do, and then that there aren't any traps you didn't think of.
You guys are tweaking the range of motion right now on it?
If you think of it as the space that the stick can move, right?
Yeah.
You have sort of roll and you have pitch. It sort of naturally forms in a normal airplane. It's a square, right? So sort of whatever that shape is, right? Yeah. But if you're doing the elevons, the pure elevons to max deflection, it ends up in a diamond. But the problem is if you go to full up stick, you're stuck. You can't, because it's a diamond, you can't add roll at maximum pitch. So if you take both surfaces and put them all the way up, you can't roll without lowering the nose. Right? So you want to get rid of that false bottom. So we're taking this diamond and turning it into a square. So we're giving up pitch authority so that we continue to have roll authority at maximum pitch authority.
You're literally limiting the back stick.
So we're trying to do, what Justin's working on right now is a soft stop. We're seeing if we can do that. So the idea being that in a panic scenario, you could pull through and get more pitch authority.
Like you break some kind of tie-off?
It's a slide. It'd be a friction thing, and it would just slide out of the way.
Okay.
But you want the pilot to know that you've reached that point where you've lost roll control.
Right.
It's a strange control system, so we want to make sure we understand how it functions, but also that it's strong enough for the task. So there's a lot of like holding the surface and putting max pilot effort in, hold the surface in another position, put max pilot effort in, that kind of stuff.
And you know where to breaking something? Or
You're trying to break stuff.
Okay.
And we did.
Okay.
So one of the things is rudder power. So you're, max pilot effort on a foot, I think, is 250 pounds is what the reg calls for.
Okay.
And you're pushing against so you're winding up all the rudder controls, all that stuff, but you're also pushing on the seat.
Right.
And we actually broke the seat yesterday. So this is the repair to the seat. There's a lot of famous accidents that were caused by seat failure. Pilot becomes overwhelmed, and then he's putting big forces on, not realizing he's putting him in the seat, and then the seat fails. And now, you don't have control of the airplane.
About what we're trying to do on a first flight, I would say we're trying to get the engine hot and shake the airplane real hard. But not get it so hot that you break something, and not shake it so hard that the parts that get loose fall off the airplane, right? So that's, in the biggest picture, what we're trying to do.
On flight number 1 or the overall program?
I'm saying flight number 1. Obviously, if we were talking about a new airplane or whatever, there's a lot of stuff about handling qualities and verifying performance and da-da-da. But in this case, like, the biggest risks that you're exposed to are the fact that, like, these nuts and bolts are all living together for the first time, and the likelihood that there's a nut or a bolt or a cable or whatever that's not hooked up right or is getting ready to fall apart or whatever is much higher as we start the program and works its way down. So what we're trying to do is sort of dip your toe in that water, shaking everything, getting everything hot, and then get back down on the ground before you get too exposed, right? And that's sort of the magic. And I think with that mindset, you can sort of see how we're going to build our way into this. The other thing is that you're starting from an airplane that, like we said, 0 feet and 0 miles an hour, 0 Gs, hasn't done anything yet. And so you want to make sure that you're being deliberate as you open that up.
That's awesome. That's what you do when everybody's working in the hangar. You bring lunch to the hangar.
No time for going out to lunch.
No, we're not stopping.
Efficiency is the name of the game.
This was such a deeply personal endeavor for Gary and his family. It was an honor to be there to be a part of this multi-generational project. We captured enough footage to probably make a documentary, honestly. Here's some of the backstory from Gary's grandson, Sean.
This concept is far older than me. I've been sitting in the cockpit since I was a toddler and have been helping my grandpa in any way I can. These are the plans to the plane that Gary's original design was based off of.
He got these back when he was thinking about doing his airplane, and then he based his work on evolving from this?
Correct. Yep, I believe he saw the Dyke Delta, liked the design a lot, thought he could improve it. I'm building an RV-8. I love RVs. It's perfect for me, but I want a plane, that I can have fun with and I can get in the air as quickly as possible. The RV, it's tried and true, thousands in the air. Everyone knows what the performance is gonna be, what it's gonna do, what the first flight's like, what testing is like, how you instrument it, how you outfit it. I mean, this is experimental aviation. It started as an idea. It was validated by some very smart people. He built a scale model, he built the full thing, and every single bracket and fixture and hull shape is all him. It's all new, it's all experimental, and it's a dream he's had, and he's built it to fruition over all this time, and it is the true experimental story.
Talking about the cooling and trying to think about success criteria, right? So if the airplane was a standard configuration, a air-cooled tractor, I have a pretty good way of...
And tractor meaning it's got a pull
motor on the front, yeah.
Okay.
I think Justin and I are both pretty comfortable in that scenario, get an idea of how to proceed and be confident that engine cooling is where it's supposed to be. But as a liquid pusher, you're kind of the worst. Automotive conversion with a modified automotive engine controller to run it. All those like habit patterns, like you remember you and I talked about at Reno. I've got a bunch of habit patterns built in there for like how to run a motor with a red knob. There is no red knob. There's a little tiny wheel on the right side of the cockpit that feeds into the ECU that runs the mixture side of it, right? So in my racing background, we would sometimes run a little fat, run a little extra gas for cooling maybe, right? And then there's like I said, there's habit patterns like it's running rough. Let's try fat, let's try lean, make sure gas is on. And because there's an ECU in the mix, you need to make sure that you transition those habit patterns to use the ECU to run that in that scenario. And it's coupled to cooling because mixture is coupled to cooling.
The classic airport experience where one guy's working on something completely new and another guy's working on an established kit design.
Yeah.
A beautiful one at that.
I brought someone else to bug you for a couple minutes.
Do you mind being on camera for a second?
Yeah.
So that's an 8, huh?
Yeah.
How you doing? I'm Steve.
I'm Brian. Steve, good to meet you.
I like to make flying videos.
Oh, okay.
I'm working on a 14.
Oh, okay.
And you're working on an 8. How far along is your 8 compared to this one?
Far ahead of me, right? I'm just working on the wings now. I have the tail done, but I'm probably about 6 months or so left to buttoning up my wings and ordering the fuselage. So he's a lot further than me.
So how long into the process have you been working on this for?
15 years.
15 years.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. A lot of part-time weekends, nights.
Yeah.
A couple moves.
Yeah.
And I assume you know your neighbor started a project 40 years ago from scratch?
Yep. When I bought this hangar 20 years ago, I remember seeing that thing for the first time. It was not quite what it is right now, but close.
Yeah, I think I would have gone with an 8 as well if I didn't decide to go side by side. Yeah. So I really like the throttle down there, and I like that you went with that. Is that a mod because stock is stock the plunger style? No. So that's the 8.
Yeah.
See,
the only difference is if you have a constant speed or not.
Yeah.
You'll either have 2 or 3 controls.
I'm really tempted to do something like a mod like that for the RV14. I think that's our goal, is to try to get it done in 2 years.
I didn't do it for the flying.
Yeah.
I still own 2 airplanes.
So you built
and
it,
still fly.
You built it for the love of the project.
Yeah. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the building process. So
yeah.
What better way?
Yeah, totally.
And I have learned a lot. I forgot half of it already, but
there's a lot of information in Gary's brain about how he runs this thing. We're gonna try to make sure we get as much of it out as we can.
And what is the engine?
This is a Mazda 3-row rotary engine. So it's a 20B.
It's like from an RX-7?
Yeah.
But it just didn't work out. And I mean, that happens. I mean, this is aviation. So despite the valiant efforts, we were not able to fly on that trip. I wish Gary all the best with this awesome project. I mean, he built that airplane. That airplane was pretty cool to look at. We were sticking, what do you call the strings? We got like time lapse of me spending an hour and a half getting them all on, and we never even did that was a great kind of taste of test flying world. We spent days working on that project, and it just didn't go.
Dude, as soon as I saw a picture of that thing, I was like, no.
Of all the things we've talked about on this call, especially about that program, that comment you just made hurts the most. Like, we knew that wasn't going to happen. Like, I knew we could make it happen. I knew we could. Never had a chance.
Well, you have to go into it thinking it's going to happen until it isn't, right? I mean, that's your job. Your job is to go assess it. No matter how crazy it looks, the owner's like, I designed this thing, let's, and you're like, here I come. I'm gonna see if I can figure this out. And you did. You stayed right to, you guys worked so hard all the way, and it got to the point where like, it's not gonna work. This is the moment I captured when Elliot and Justin realized they weren't gonna be able to pull it together to fly that week. You can either remotely consult somebody who wants to be a cowboy like Dave, or there might be guys who are like, I don't want to do my first flight, I want Elliot to come do it.
One of the biggest strengths of Wasabi is the variety of projects that we work on. And what that means is that there's some flexibility there, and all this stuff that we're talking about, there's a big difference between some of the one-off designed by a first-time designer in a remote location program. There's a big difference between that and a shake and bake RV. There's few airplanes on the planet that have been built than RVs. I think what's important to say though is that even though it's shake and bake, like these are still parts that have never flown together as a system, and therefore they need to be treated with respect, right? And I think what Dave can relate is that as a good pilot, you want to open that door deliberately and with the precision of all the rest of the flying that you want to do. And so the trick here is that recognizing where the envelope is, where you're taking it, and when you're expanding it, and how that relates to the risk of the moment. And doing that with a clear head at 0 feet and 0 miles an hour, separate from the helmet fire that can happen very quickly on flight day. In this case, it's much simpler with a shake and bake situation, but still, the more work that you can do ahead of time and prepare yourself, understand what the dance card is before you get there, the more prepared you are.
Right, so exactly that's what we're looking for. So let's make a dance card.
Got it. Let's make a dance card.
Since filming this, we've picked up the EAA test flight materials, and upcoming episodes will address what we land on for our program. Please share any thoughts or questions in the comments.
If you had a successful 20 minutes and the airplane performed like you thought it would, can you then, with reasonable amount of risk, go back up second flight, burn it for an hour and a half, and just run that thing the way they want you to run it and then come back down.
1,000%, right? I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. The problem is we're going from no envelope to some envelope, and the trick with this first flight is blow the envelope out enough that you got enough room to play to do the rest of the work.
My only concern is engine braking. So I feel like if we do the first flight, the 20-minute flight, whatever, bring it back, look for leaks, and then get into, so do whatever we need to do to get that first flight done properly, safely, and then we can get into breaking it in for 2 hours or 3 hours, but we're clearly not going to do that in the first flight.
Yeah, no 2 hours, 3 hours, yeah. Again, in that context of what's the minimum amount of time I can shake the airplane more than I have, where I'm confident that the things that get loose won't fall off, is the way I like to think about it.